This is from JavaScript, second edition, step by step by Steve Suring, and I'm almost done with it. I've had it from the library for a couple months now. The projects, most of the projects in this book use this ehandler.js external JavaScript file to create events and functions for different elements. So because the book is using this, and this is what I'm studying, I'm going to go on ahead and utilize it as well. This var ehandler for ehandler.js has a couple of things, and it's asking if document.add event listener. It wants to find out if the browser that you're using uses add event listener. If it doesn't, like maybe Internet Explorer might be different than Chrome, then it asks else if document.attach event. So there's two different ways that it wants you to be able to create events: add event listener and attach event. So the first part, well, make sure that you type all the code that you see, whether you hear me read it or not. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight the first if, which, like I said, it's asking if the browser uses document.add event listener. Then two things inside of that would be ehandler.add, and then you go have all this, or you have ehandler.remove. If the browser uses the document.attach event, then it'll use this, and this is the way that the code wants you to have ehandler.add and ehandler.remove. So I'm going to highlight the first half, the beginning, and all the way to before you get to the else if. Pause the video, type everything exactly the way you see it, and then come in here and type the rest of it, because I'm trying to make this video very fast, or faster than normal. Okay, so if you're done with that, I'm going to move down. And this is the rest of the code. This is the second half of this external JavaScript called ehandler.js. This is the else if that pertains to browsers that use the document.attach event. So go ahead and pause this and type the rest of this, and then I'll get to the regular web page code. Alright, so if you're done with that, I'm going to close out of this ehandler.js, and I'm going to go through this as quickly as possible as well. This file is called test.html, and you see the output right here to the left with this pizza form. So this part, HTML head title that says test, and script source equals ehandler.javascript and script. This is just starting our web page, and this is linking to that external JavaScript that we went over, that you had to pause this to copy. This script inside of the head is a function that we are going to use. When we click the button here, it's going to call the function prep pizza. Prepza. You could change that if you don't like the way that looks, but that's what the book did. So function prep pizza. And then you have your opening curly brace. So each little section I'm going to highlight like this, and this is a note. This creates an order heading. So I'm going to click sausage. Regular and small for crust and size are default values already selected. I'm going to click the prep pizza button. This little section of code that's highlighted is going to create this header that says this pizza will have. So if you need to pause this so that you can type all these statements, there's 4 statements in this highlighted area, go ahead, because I'm going to quickly read through each of these statements and move on. Var new element equals document.create element p, so we're creating a paragraph tag here. New element dot set attribute in parentheses and double quotes ID comma order heading. The next statement, document.body.append child parentheses new element. And the last statement, new element.append child and in parentheses document.create text node and in parentheses the string in double quotes this pizza will have. Okay, let's move on to the next. Pause it if you have to, if not, great. This part is going to give us the topping code. Now what we're dealing with is, initially this is just a paragraph this pizza will have. Now we're going to deal with all the stuff inside the form. And the topping code is going to deal with all these check boxes that are in this column. So var checkboxes equals document.forms pizzaform.toppingcheck.length. Let me explain this a little bit before I move on to the rest. Document.forms pizza form. This form that is bordered in red has an ID equals pizza form. Okay? And the topping check, each one of these check boxes has the name, has an attribute in the tag that says name equals topping check. So when we have document.forms pizzaform.toppingcheck.length, what that second part to the right of the equal sign does is it goes in here and it counts all of the check boxes that have the name of pizza of topping check in the form with the idea of pizza form. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So on this side of the equal sign, it comes up with the value 9, it counts them, and it puts them in this variable called checkboxes. Okay, so I've explained that. Then we have a for loop. For var I equals 0, I less than checkboxes, I plus plus. This is our standard for loop that's going to loop through each and every one of these checkboxes. And what it's going to do is it's going to get here to the if condition. It's going to ask this question. This is a condition. If document.forms pizzaform.toppingcheck I, meaning whatever increment it's on, checked. So in the beginning of the loop, it's going to check this one. It's going to check if it's checked. If it's not checked, then that means document.forms pizzaform.toppingcheck I checked is false. So if it's false, all this code gets ignored. It comes back up here to the for loop, and then I goes from equaling 0 to it will now equal 1. And it's saying, is 1 less than 9? Well, that's true, so then it's going to go on ahead and it's going to try this again. It's going to ask if the next one is checked. If pepperoni is checked, then it's going to do the stuff that's in these curly braces. So let's just say that it is checked, and this is what the code's going to say. Var new element equals document.createElement li. This time we're going to create a list item that has a bullet point right here, if it's true. Actually, I can run it again. This pizza will have pepperoni, regular crust, and small size, because this is what's checked right now. Var new element equals document.createElement li. The next statement says new element.set attribute, and in parentheses and double quotes, id comma new element. The next statement says document.body.append child, and in parentheses new element. And the last statement is kind of long. It says new element.append child, parentheses document.create text node, parentheses document.forms pizzaform.toppingcheck I.value. So what it's going to do in this last statement, this long one, is whatever the name of this checkbox, all of these checkboxes have the name of topping check, but the values of each of these are different. Like this value is sausage. It's actually Italian sausage because the value that I gave it is Italian sausage. This right here is just a word that's in between the table data cell opening, the check box input tag and ending table data cell tag, just so that you can see that word on the face of the form. But the value of this checkbox is Italian sausage. The value of this checkbox is pepperoni. So it's basically what's going to spit out here. Okay. So double check that you have all of that properly typed, and then pause this if you need to, and I'm going to move on to the crust code. Remember that the topping code we are dealing with checkboxes, and the crust code and the size code we're dealing with radio dials. So it's similar, but it's not identical. Very similar. Alright, I'm going to move the crust code now. I'm going to do all this. Here we have two statements before we get to the for loop. The first statement is var crust type equals document.forms pizzaform.crust. So every single one of these radio dials here have the name of crust. It's in the pizza form, and it has an input of radio, and the input of radio has a name of crust. So all three of these have the name of crust. All 9 of these have the name of topping check, and all of these in the last column have the name, the radio dials have the name of size. Okay, so back to this crust code. Already did this one. Var crust length equals crust type dot length. So we're taking we are taking all of the radio dials that have the name of crust, and we're putting it into this variable called crust type, and then we're taking that and using the dot length to count them. So this is going to give us 3 different possibilities, and that numeric value is going to go into crust length. So then when we get to the for loop, var c equals 0, as long as 0 is less than 3, because the value of crust length is 3, then c will increment by 1 each iteration of the loop. If crust type c, which starts off as 0 and then it goes up the loop and then it turns into 1, then it goes up and turns into 2, and so on and so forth, if it's checked, which this isn't a check mark, but it means checked, if the first one is checked, which this one is, regular is checked, then it's going to do all of this. Var new element equals document.create element li, because now we're creating a list item. Next statement, new element dot set attribute id, comma, crust element. Next statement, document.body dot append child, in parentheses new element. And the last statement, new element dot append child, in parentheses document.create text node, parentheses crust type index c dot value, plus now with the crust and the size, we are tacking on not just the value of the checkbox or the value of the radio dial, but we are also concatenating with a plus sign a space and a word. So in this case, we have the value of the crust, then we are tacking on a space and the word crust. So now whenever you see crust, you see regular and the word crust, and whenever, same thing with the size, you see small, a space, and the word size. So those are a little different than how our checkboxes work, because we didn't concatenate any other words, we just put the value of that checkbox output. Okay, so we just did all of this, so hopefully you have all that typed. If not, pause it, because I'm getting ready to move on to the size code. Alright, here's the size code, and it's going to basically be a repeat of the crust code. Var, and we're working with these radio dials over here. Var size equals document.forms pizzaform.size. Var size length equals size.length. For var s equals 0, s less than size length, s plus plus. If size index s dot checked, if that's true, then we move on. Var new element equals document.create element, li, creating a list item. New element dot set attribute, parentheses and double quotes, id, comma, size element. Next, document.body.append child, in parentheses new element. And the last statement, new element.append child, in parentheses document.create text node, in parentheses size index s dot value plus concatenate a space and the word size. And the very last thing that we have right here is our final closing curly brace, which matches the curly brace for the function, the beginning of the function. Now, just in case you didn't finish the size code, maybe I went over it too fast, I'll highlight it here. Don't forget the end of the script tag as well. And go on ahead and finish typing. Put it on pause, finish typing, and then I'll move on to the style. Alright, hopefully you're finished, and we're moving on to the style now. Okay, so here's our opening style tag on line 60, and it goes all the way down to our closing style tag on line 100. Table TH and TD, which means table tag, table header tag, and table data cell tag, all share border thin blue solid and padding of 7 pixels. the table has a width of 100% and a background color of blue, but I have misspelled width, so it's currently not being used, and I'll come back to this in a moment. The table header tag has a background color of gray, which you can see right here what the table header is, because you can see what has a background color of gray. The table data cell has a background color of white, and you can also tell at a glance what the TD tags are, table data cells, because they have a background color of white. I have a button down here that I gave an ID equals prep button. So pound prep button is telling us that. Font size of 20 pixels, background color of yellow, border 10 pixels, green outset, padding 5 pixels with 100%, border radius 20 pixels. I would like to show you what the prep button looks like if I take the width of 100% off by misspelling it. Save it and refresh. The button is only going to be as long as it needs to be. Unless you give it a width of pixels or percent, it's only going to grow as wide as the text that's on the face. With that being said, let me quickly go over the form and then I'll tell you more about the table. For the form, I have float left, border thick red solid, padding 5 pixels, and margin 20 pixels. Now, the form is this red border right here, and everything else is inside of the form. Let me misspell float and watch what happens to the form. So basically it's like I'm taking this whole line right here and deleting it so that it only has a border of thick red solid, padding, and margin. The fact that the form wants to be as wide as the window is, it's dynamic and it stretches, that the only way that I can get it to hug up against the table is by giving it this float left. If I give it float left, it hugs up to what's inside of it. So depending on how you want your elements to function on your page, if you don't want that to hug up against, you want it to be flexible. You want it to stretch and be dynamic. Let's say you want your window to be the same. Not the window, the table. The table element is just like the button. It's only going to be as wide as it needs to be unless you force it with a width. So if I go back up to my table and give it a width of 100%, now it's going to go stretch itself to 100% of the container that it's in, which happens to be a form, and this form wants to follow the width of the window. So when you make the table 100%, it's going to follow. And then if I want to make that button 100% again, width of 100%, save it. Now the form, the table, and the button are all going to stretch and contract dynamically based on the size of the window, which you would consider this like a liquid layout. And this may be the route that you want to go. So I'm just going to leave this. The one thing is, if it's liquid and it's all stretched out like this, when I click Prep Pizza, all my output information is going to obviously be below the form because there's no room to the right of it. If you don't want your output to show below the form, then you might want to go back to how I had it originally, where the table is not stretching to the form, and you might want to have the form hug up against the table so that you have this little space here, so that when you click your button you actually have your output floating along to the right of it. That's just completely up to you how you want your sheet or your page to look. Okay, so I went over all the style. Now let's get to, that's the end of the head, here's the beginning of the body. Let's get to the actual elements that you see on the page. Here's our form tag. We gave it the ID of pizzaform, and pizzaform is used in all of our JavaScript that we created. It's right there, it's here, it's in our for loop for our topping code, it's in our crust code, and it's in our size code. So it's pretty important that we gave that form an ID. ID equals pizzaform. And this one has action equals, and it's got the pound symbol in double quotes. table, table row. Okay, let's quickly go over this. The first table row has 3 headers, so there's our header tags. And then inside of the header tags we have topping, crust, and size. And you can see that clearly, topping, crust, and size. The next table row has sausage, regular, and small. So we have 3 table data cells. There's 1 table data cell, there's 2 table data cells, there's 3. And that's the whole table row. In the first table data cell, here's our input tag. Input type equals checkbox, ID equals topping 1, value equals Italian sausage, name equals topping check. And in between the ending table data tag and this input, which is the checkbox tag, we just have the word sausage so that you can see it right there. If I take sausage off and save it, you cannot see anything but the checkbox there, so that would drive you insane to have a form like that. So make sure you have something to indicate what it is on the table data cell itself. The second table data cell, input, this time type is equal to radio because we're talking about a radio dial. The name is equal to crust, the value is equal to regular. Checked equals checked means that we are making this particular radio button the default. If you don't put checked equals checked, then when you first start this, there will be nothing checked at all here. Kind of like the checkboxes. There's nothing checked at all on the checkboxes. Sometimes it's nice to have a default value if it's the most popular. It just allows the user to not have to click something if the most popular value is a default value. They can just leave it what it is. ID is radio size 1, and the text that you can see right there on the table data cell is regular. The last table data cell, here's our input, again type of radio, name size, name equals size, value equals small, checked equals checked, because small is being created as the default value for the size of pizza, which you don't have to do that. The default, you may sell more medium pizzas, you might want to make medium the default. If that was the case, then down here in the medium input radio tag, you would take this checked equals checked, you would cut it out of small, and this is the input for the medium. You just try to make a little space there and stick it there, and that way now medium is the default. Okay, I lost my train of thought. Alright, this whole table row is basically copied and pasted over and over again until we have all these rows complete. Very quickly, this table row, TD, input type equals checkbox, ID equals topping 2, value equals pepperoni, name equals topping check, pepperoni, TD. TD, input type radio, name equals crust, value equals deep dish, ID equals radio size 2, deep dish, and TD. TD, input type radio, name equals size, value equals medium, ID equals radio size 2, checked equals checked, medium, and TD, and TR. Now, you copy and paste that here. You change pepperoni to ham, you change deep dish to thin, you change medium to large, you change ID to topping 3 here, radio size 3 and radio size 3. Now, I don't know if you've noticed the pattern or not yet, but starting with our first checkbox, the name is topping check, and the name is topping check for every single one of these checkboxes. When you get to the second column right here, the name is crust, and if you notice the pattern, in every single one of these rows, every one of these radio dials, the name equals crust. The only thing that's changing is the value. The value and what you type that you want the user to see on the form. Only thing. Same thing with this last column. This input radio, the name is equal to size, and that name is the same across every single one in this column of size. So pepperoni turns to ham, and thin large for that row. This row we don't have any more types of crust or size, so we just put in an empty set of TD tags in case we want to use it in the future. Maybe we want to invent a different crust or a different size, so we just keep these here as placeholders. So table row, table data cell, input type equals checkbox, ID equals topping 4, value equals green peppers, name equals topping check, and the text that you see on the form is green peppers in that table data cell. So here's green peppers and 2 blank table data cells. So now you take that one and copy and paste it. And now the only thing you're changing is from topping 4 to topping 5, and mushrooms, value of mushrooms, and what you see on the form, mushrooms. Do it again, do it again, do it again, and do it again. And I think that we're almost at the bottom. The last table row is this one with the button. It's got a table data cell of a col span of 3 so that it stretches. I'm not talking about the button, I'm talking about the TD that it's inside of with the blue border. It's got a col span of 3 so that it goes across 3 columns. And here's our input. Input type equals button, ID equals prep button, value equals prep pizza. And you see prep pizza as what's showing on the button. That's what the value does for this button input. Alright, end of TD, end of TR, end of table, end of form. And the very last thing that we need to make this work, since we're using that external JavaScript, we have to use this to create the click events for this button. And that has 2 lines of code. Var prep button equals document.getElementById by ID prep button, and ehandler.add prep button, comma, click in double quotes, comma, function. And then you have inside of the curly braces, you're calling the prepza or prep pizza function with the empty parentheses and the semicolon. And then inside that, all of this, there's your outer parenthesis, both your outer parentheses, and then you finally have the semicolon that ends the entire statement. You just have to make sure that when you get to the ehandler.add, that this right here is matching the button's ID. It's not so much what the name of this variable is, because you're using this document.getElementById by ID prep button to grab this button, right? Because the ID is prep button. If you give this name different than prep button, right, and then you run this. Let's have green peppers, thin, large. Okay, that still worked. That still worked because you properly were pointing to the ID of the prep button, and that's what's really being used, this ehandler.add. If I put prep button z, the name of the variable here, let's see what it does. Sausage, regular, small. That still works because it's still correctly pointing to prep button, this variable. But if you misspell this is not the ID that this is. Now it should break the code and it should not work. Let's have a ham, a thin ham, large pizza. See, you click the button and nothing happens. So the important part is that this in the parentheses and double quotes matches that. These two must match. And then whatever you want to call your variable here, you can call, it doesn't matter. Just make sure that this is right. Alright, this is the last time. I'm going to try to call everything. Everything on a deep dish and a small pizza. This pizza will have Italian sausage, pepperoni, ham, green peppers, mushrooms, onions, pineapple, extra cheese, extra sauce, deep dish crust, and small size. Goodbye.